Students, good morning once again and welcome to the new class. Students, yesterday I introduced you very briefly to W.B. Yeats. Today we are going to have a look at his journey, at his career as a poet, playwright, a political activist, and a great literary personality of 20th century. Students, the turn of the 19th century marked Yeats's increased interest in theatre, an interest influenced by his father. His father was a famous artist and orator who loved highly dramatic moments in literature. In the summer of the year 1897, Yeats enjoyed his first stay at Cooley Park, the County Galway estate of Lady Augusta Gregory. There he devised with Lady Gregory and her neighbor Edward Martin plans for promoting an innovative native Irish drama. In the year 1899, they staged the first of 3 annual productions in Dublin, including Yeats's The Countess Kathleen, and in the year 1902, they supported a company of amateur Irish actors in staging both George Russell's Irish legend Deirdre and Yeats's Kathleen Ní Houlihan. Students, the success of these productions led to the founding of Irish National Theatre Society with Yeats as its president. A wealthy sponsor volunteered to pay for the renovation of Dublin's Abbey Theatre as the company's permanent home, and the theatre opened on December 27, 1904. It included plays by the company's 3 directors, Lady Gregory, J.M. Synge, and Yeats. Students, during the first decade of 20th century, Yeats was extremely active in the management of the Abbey Theatre Company. At this time, he also wrote 10 plays, and the simple, direct style of dialogue required for the stage became an important consideration in his poems as well. Students, soon Yeats abandoned the heavily elaborated style of the Wind Among the Reeds in favor of conversational rhythms and simpler diction. This transformation in his poetic style can be traced in his first 3 collections of 20th century. The titles of these collections are In the Seven Woods, that was published in the year 1903, The Green Helmet and Other Poems, 1910, and Responsibilities, 1914. Simplification was only the first of several major stylistic changes. In an essay with the title Yeats as an Example, that was published in Preoccupations Selected Prose, 1968-1978, the prominent Irish poet Seamus Heaney commended Yeats for continually altering and refining his poetic craftsmanship. And he He is indeed the ideal example for poet approaching middle age. Henne declared that Yeats reminds you that revision and slog work are what you may have to undergo if you seek the satisfaction of finish. He bothers you with his suggestion that if you have managed to do one kind of poem in your own way, you should cast off that way and face into another area of your experience until you have learned a new voice to say that area properly. Students eventually Yeats began experimenting as a playwright in this era, in this phase of his life. And in the year 1916, for instance, he adopted a deliberately esoteric, non-realistic dramatic style based on Japanese no plays, a theatrical form to which he had been introduced by poet Ezra Pound. These plays were described by Yeats as plays for dancers. While Yeats fulfilled his duties as president of the Abbey Theatre group for the first 15 years of 20th century, his nationalistic fervor was less evident. Morgan had moved to Paris with her husband, exiled revolutionary John McBride, and the author was left without her encouragement. In the year 1916, Yeats once again became a staunch exponent of his nationalistic cause, inspired by the Easter Rising, an unsuccessful six-day armed rebellion of Irish republicans against the British in Dublin. MacBride, who was now separated from Gunn, participated in the rebellion and was executed afterwards. Yeats reacted by writing Easter 1916, an eloquent expression of his complex feelings of shock, romantic admiration, and a more realistic appraisal. The Easter Rising contributed to Yeats's eventual decision to reside in Ireland rather than England, and his marriage to Hyde-Lees in the year 1917 further strengthened that resolve. Earlier, in an introductory verse to Responsibilities, he had asked his ancestors' pardon for not yet having married to continue his Irish lineage. Yeats says, although I have come close on 49, I have no child, I have nothing but a book. With marriage came another period of exploration into complex and esoteric subjects for Yeats. After his marriage, Yeats continued to explore mysticism. Only 4 days after the wedding, his bride began what would be a lengthy experiment with the psychic phenomena called automatic writing, in which her husband and her hand and pen presumably served as unconscious instruments for the spirit world to send information. Yeats and his wife held more than 400 sessions of automatic writing, producing nearly 4,000 pages that Yeats avidly and patiently studied and organized. From these sessions, Yeats formulated theories about life and history. He believed that certain patterns existed, the most important being what he called gyres, interpenetrating cones representing mixture of opposites of both a personal and historical nature. Yeats found that within each 2000 years era, emblematic moments occurred at the midpoints of the 1000 year halves. At these moments of balance, he believed a civilization could achieve spatial excellence, and Yeats cited as example of splendor of Athens at 500 BC, Byzantium at AD 500, and the Italian Renaissance at AD 1500. During this phase of Yeats's life, Yeats's esoterica Ireland was rife with internal strife. Students, in the year 1921, bitter controversies erupted within the new Irish Free State over the partition of Northern Ireland and over the wording of a formal oath of allegiance to the British Crown. These issues led to an Irish Civil War which lasted from June 1922 to May 1923. Yeats emphatically sided with the new Irish government. He accepted a 6-year appointment to the Senate of the Irish Free State in December 1922, a time when rebels were kidnapping government figures and burning their homes. In Dublin, where Yeats had assumed permanent residence in the year 1922, the government even posted armed sentries at his door. By this time, Yeats had become an artist of world fame, and he was an impressive figure of a great stature, and he received the Nobel Prize for Literature in the year 1928. Major work that he wrote during this decade of his life includes his collection The Tower, that was published in 1928, which is often considered his best book. The Wild and Swans at Cool, 1917, Michael Roberts and the Dancer in 1921 are some of his major famous creations of this era. Students, an important element of the poems in these collections and other volumes is Yeats's keen awareness of old age. Even in his romantic poems from the late 1890s, often mentioning grey hair and weariness, though these poems were written while he was still a young man. Students, when Yeats was nearing his sixth decade, when he was nearly 60, his health began to fail and he was faced with real rather than imaginary bodily decrepitude and nearness to death. Despite his often keen awareness of his physical decline, the last 15 years of his life were marked with extraordinary vitality and appetite for life. He continued to write plays including Sophocles' King Oedipus and Sophocles' Oedipus at Colonus. The Words Upon the Window Pane, that was published in the year 1934, is one such, are some of his major plays written during this era. Students, throughout his last years, Yeats's creative imagination remained very much his own, isolated to a remarkable degree from the successive fashions of modern poetry despite his extensive contacts with other poets. Literary modernism had no inherent attraction for him except perhaps in its general association with youthful vigor. He admired a wide range of traditional English poetry and drama, and he simply was unconcerned that during the last 2 decades of his life, his preference for using rhyme and strict stanza forms would set him apart from the vogue of modern poetry. Yeats's allegiance to poetic tradition did not extend, however, to what he considered an often obscure, overly learned use of literary and cultural traditions by T.S. Eliot and Ezra Pound. Yeats deplored the tremendous enthusiasm among the younger poets for T.S. Eliot's The Waste Land, that was published in the year 1922. He felt that the literary traditions furnishing Eliot with so many allusions and quotations should only be included in a poem if those traditions had so excited the individual poet's imagination that they could become poetic ingredients of the sort Yeats described in Tower. Students, W.B. Yeats wanted poetry to engage the full complexity of life, but only insofar as the individual poet's imagination had direct access to experience or thought, and only insofar as those materials were transformed by the energy of artistic articulation. He was a poet who tried to transform the local concerns of his own life by embodying them in the resonantly universal language of his poems. His brilliant rhetorical accomplishments, strengthened by his considerable powers of rhythm and poetic phrase, have earned wide praise from readers and especially from fellow poets including W. H. Auden, Stephen Spender, Theodore Roethke, and Philip Larkin. Students, this much for today. We will meet in next class.